we think about intelligence, we often imagine singular minds or systems. But what happens when intelligence becomes decentralized and collective? Welcome to Everything Bagel. I'm your host, Alex Kehaya, joined by my co-host, Bidhan Roy, founder of Bagel. And today we're going to explore AI's collective knowledge and decentralized intelligence with our special guest, Nick Emmons, co-founder and CEO of Allora, a decentralized AI network. Let's kick it off. And maybe Nick, if you can start off and just tell me a little bit about who you are and why you're here working on what you're working on. Like, what's getting you out of bed every morning, every day to do this? Because I know it's super hard having founded a company myself. Like, why are you waking up to work on this problem that Allora's trying to solve?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to dig into a bit. So I've been in crypto for a long time at this point, feels like a very long time. And when we sort of first started down this path that we've been on with the company, we were trying to solve these kind of general problems of using decentralized networks to create more efficient market environments for kind of more assets in the world. Like, if I think that the closer we can get to a kind of hyper financialized future where we can use kind of market or market flavored mechanisms to coordinate people towards objectives, the kind of better the world is, the better society is. And so when we started the company, we were really focused on problems around coordinating different actors in decentralized networks towards reaching resolutions or coming to consensus on the resolutions to subjective questions. This is, I think, like a quite useful problem to kind of focus on in bridging the gap into these kind of more nebulous problem areas in crypto and in uncovering kind of different solutions that decentralized networks can lead to. And as we were building out this kind of like general research or mechanisms for coordinating kind of actors in these more subjective domains, we realized that humans in these systems are quite inefficient. We're just really kind of unscalable, inefficient computers. And so very early on, this was in early 2021, we started building some of the earlier AI x crypto infrastructure and leveraging AI in crypto systems to create more efficient sort of pricing models and market systems or financial primitives for long tail assets, NFTs, things like NFTs that don't just have to be PFPs, can be art, can be game items, can be things like this, because AI is the most deflationary technology to ever exist. It allows us to process massive amounts of information really efficiently, and it can be a useful tool in sort of scaling the scope in which markets can be applied to things in the world. And as we were working through these problems and building more or less kind of centralized AI infrastructure for crypto systems, we started to, I guess, learn about this really fundamental problem in AI that we've come to kind of name siloed machine intelligence. But each model that exists in each instance of AI that exists in this kind of isolated silo. I can't take a bunch of models, merge them together, and create a kind of new form of intelligence that represents the kind of sum of intelligence of those underlying models. And so what we did is we took a lot of the early work we did around this kind of subjective consensus mechanism design with the work we did around AI-powered crypto systems to create what we're creating now, which is this kind of decentralized collective intelligence network, trying to tackle this specific problem of siloed machine intelligence by enabling many different models to collectively optimize different shared ML objectives, kind of collectively like combine their intelligence in a way that creates this source of more performant intelligence that represents the sort of best pieces of all the underlying models and creating this kind of self-improving source of collective intelligence. So long-winded history.
No, it's super fascinating because, like, I forget what Ocean Protocol, right? Like, they were about data markets. And I think this has been like market-driven incentives and aligning people's behavior to drive certain kinds of outcomes has always been kind of a pillar of the dream of crypto since I started, which was like 2016. And I feel like it's been like a mixed bag with like the success of these things actually like coming to market and creating something useful. And what you're talking about is it's like a market for different models that are living on a server somewhere, and they're providing a service, which is inference, right? Like I ask it a question, it infers the answer, just for people who don't know what that is. And and then you're like kind of combining that stuff together to get like a smarter outcome, like a better, more reliable, faster outcome. Like, what does that even look like? Like, it's not like that LM is like that model is on the same server as another model, or is it? I mean, is that like how it happens? Like how does this even work? Are like the models like talking to each other on servers? Like I almost need a picture to like understand how this logistically even it plays out.
Yeah, I can walk through an example and kind of a flow. So basically, the network is broken into a bunch of these subnetworks that we call topics that are basically defined by an objective function. Like, given some function, have a bunch of models optimize said function. And to give like a simple example, let's say we have a topic for price prediction. That
Mhm.
topic and its objective function is defined such that you are producing the best output if you're producing the best price prediction, if you're predicting ETH to USD over some time frame. And so how models kind of contribute to this shared source of collective intelligence now is they're each producing and sharing inference with the network around their price prediction for some asset pair over some time frame.
Hmm.
And their inferences are then being kind of combined with each other based on their ability to produce accurate price predictions over time. And we can go deeper into how that mechanism is. I don't know how interesting it is,
No,
but
but it is it now it's kind of clicking for me, right? So it is like a blockchain where you have consensus, right? But it's a bunch of AIs like that are doing the consensus, they're creating that consensus, right? Like each individual model is like a validator, but instead of saying, "Hey, this transaction landed, and we all agree that this is what the state of the ledger is," they're saying, "Here's the price we predicted," and now we're all kind of coming to a consensus around that price. But like, is there is there a feedback loop for each model? Like, I guess because you can't train an LLM on the fly unless it's AGI or using something like cognitive,
Mhm.
cognitive AI. So how does the network kind of come to consensus and almost adjust? Because I do feel like I don't know. It's like it feels a little, and maybe it is just math, right? But like proof of history on Solana, like that consensus mechanism, you get to like 51% or whatever it is that like then that transaction gets written and that's the block and that's the truth.
Mm.
Um, that is just like, yeah, they're all just using proof of stake and come to the same answer for like a single point. But in this thing, we're talking about something that's like almost like alive, right? Like it's like how does that work? And am I even wrapping my head around this correctly?
No, no, that's pretty spot on. It's pretty good. So basically, there's more or less two types of actors. There's kind of two different types of model actors or inference actors in the network that we call workers, and those are the people that are actually running models. Those are the people that are trying to optimize these objective functions. But the second class of actor is what we call a reputer. And on regular kind of cadences, at a slower cadence than these inference workers or these people running models are participating, these reputers are reaching consensus on the ultimate weights or losses that each of these inference workers realized over a given time step. And so these reputers act as almost like a consensus layer, almost like a kind of oracle network in sourcing some ground truth or some additional data for assessing the actual performance of models within a given topic, and then reporting on those, reaching consensus on those, and reporting those to the underlying network. And so in that, you have this kind of like feedback loop on a regular cadence for, I guess, crystallizing the performance or the relative contribution each model provides to the kind of stream of collective outputs that are being emitted from the network, if that makes sense.
So they were called refuters, you said?
Reputers, like
Reputers.
reputation, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's sort of like two networks. There's like the subnets of all the AIs that are topic
Mhm.
based. So they're like in doing the inference, and then you've got these reputers who are looking at the results of all of these different models inference, and they're kind of saying the weights and things that you're talking about. That's like how it decides like how close to the right answer it is.
Basically, and I guess more granularly, how much it contributed relative to the other models in the network. And so I guess just quickly
Interesting.
Yeah, quickly to tie the reputers to something more concrete. In the price prediction example, you can picture a bunch of models being run that are predicting prices, say over an hour time step. And then reputers are coming in on an hourly cadence and saying, okay, now we have the real market data that's been revealed. Let's score and reach consensus on how well each of those models contributed to the collective output. And I think that notion of like relative contribution is important because I can be running a bunch of duplicated models that are each producing the same price prediction, and the relative usefulness of each of those duplicated models isn't that useful for maximizing the performance of that collective output that the network is ultimately emitting. And so what we do is we take all of these outputs that these workers are emitting from their models, and one by one, we remove them from the collective output to see the delta or the difference in performance that new collective output has. And if that difference is great, and in a kind of negative direction, that means that model contributed a lot to the kind of positive output of that collective inference. If we take out their one inference and the delta doesn't change or it goes up, we know that they either didn't contribute a lot of kind of relative value to that collective output, or they're actually contributing negatively to it. And so we use this notion of relative contribution to create this, I guess, like more representative scoring system for these models, which are all emitting these kinds of like heterogeneous outputs in the system.
And it's
So
fascinating.
curious, Nick, like talking more technically, I guess, like for each topic, the models are trying to minimize or optimize the loss function.
Yeah.
Right. And then like they are incentivized to help each other so that they can collectively optimize the loss function better. Is there a part of that as well?
I think there's a part of that in the sense that there is that inherent to market environments in general. Like market environments are a form of collective intelligence on the basis that it's everyone competing based on their own self-interests. Market environments are great at turning competition into some better collective output. And so in that sense, in each model competing with each other to produce a better output, they are also sort of collaboratively optimizing the problem together as well.
So yeah, I only thought that I understood Allora, but it's like a little bit more details on that.
I mean, it's fascinating. It's incredible. And it really does feel like the Matrix. Like it's like, a self-healing, self-organizing, bare metal organism.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, that's kind of the
That's where you're going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like evolutionary biology in the sort of environment of intelligence provisioning, essentially.
Yeah, and you even have these like amoeba animations on your website that that totally make a lot of sense to me now. So Bidhan, like I think I can see how this ties into the work you guys are doing, but can you just like explain that? How does something like what Nick is building interact with Bagel, or how can he leverage it?
Yeah, I mean, before that, like quickly, Bagel is a infrastructure to make open source monetizable. That's what we do. We're building infrastructure where any open source developer can contribute to a model, and then when that model generates revenue, they get attributed some of the revenue back automatically, cryptographically verified, and we're making strides of improvement in the research part of that. And how it works with Allora, we have been actually talking to Allora a lot in collaborating on a lot of the products that we're building. But how we see it is like we are like a different part of the stack where you actually build the models, these open source models together. You piece them together, and then they can be leveraged on a platform like Allora to actually generate the actual revenue to monetize. So let's say it's like you and I come together and build an open source model, which is super optimized for a certain topic of the Allora network.
Mm-hmm.
And then we collaborate on that because just one of us working on it might not be enough capital or might not be enough compute or whatnot. So we build that, we bring that to Allora, then we kind of use that to get some of the rewards by contributing to the network. So it's like after the model is built, you can equalize it on Allora as another revenue stream. And did I say it correctly?
I think that's spot on. That's exactly right. You kind of have these like nested forms of like collectively or collaboratively generated forms of intelligence, essentially.
Yeah, it's
that's the power of crypto, right? Like they allow multiple people to come together and build things together.
So you guys bring in this monetization layer that can compose with what Allora is doing. And really the way I look at Allora is like, it allows it like you and I create this initial model for price prediction. And then we just like shove it on the Allora network and like run an inference server. And as long as it's a useful topic that lots of people are subscribing to or trying to use and pay for, it's going to drive demand for us. And our model's going to keep getting better. What's even crazier is if this is like earning on the fly kind of thing, and you and I are the co-contributors to this model, like, are we still getting credited for that? Or is the AI get credited? Who gets paid? Is the AGI now they need a wallet address and they own the new contributions, the updates to the model, to the improvements? How does that work?
Well, first of all, I don't think we should be differentiating between human and AI anymore. Like, we are reaching a point where we will be discussing what kind of rights an AI system have, right? If it's like should we be like doing something in favor of human only, or should we be building systems where we are not being anti-AI kind of thing? So, but that's what I think. So from the perspective of Bagel, we always built the solution in a way that it can be used by both humans and agents. Let's say like those are the AI systems, which has a cool name. See, there are multiple agents that are coming together to build another bigger agent which can earn money on the Allora network. Then they should get it. They should have a crypto wallet, and they should get their rewards permissionlessly, and they can monetize it that way.
Interesting. Nick, on the website, it says on the Allora website, collective knowledge creates the best inference. I think it's a great headline. And I have a much better understanding of what that actually means, but I kind of want to hear it from you. Because I like my interpretation based on what you just said to me is like the collective knowledge here is the sharing of the collective inference that then we come to consensus around and then gets improved by all the models now get better over time because they used collective inference. I guess it's a two-part question. What's your explanation of that, or did I get that right? And two is this is just inference, but there's also like data that gets fed into the model, which is something where like I think Bagel plays a pretty big part in like helping people monetize that. But are you guys also playing in that arena where there's like a data market piece, or is it really, because inference is data, but there's data before the inference. So I guess I'm trying to like draw a line there of like which market are you guys in that market too, or is that like more Bagel's market, or how does that play out?
Yeah. I'll start at the first one, but yeah, I think that second question is a good question as well. But with the first point, I think one issue with the existing paradigm of how people interact with AI today is it's very model centric. When any of us are interacting with AI, whether it's chatting with some chatbot or using some model to like better trade markets, we're constantly needing to evaluate the kind of total universe of models that exists and reevaluate these things. Is this model good at this task? Is this model good at this other task? Is this new model that just emerged better than either of them in different domains? What we're trying to create with Allora is kind of an abstraction layer for intelligence. So instead of consumers of AI needing to constantly be evaluating and doing this sort of like searching of the best model for a given task in a given domain in a given context, all people have to do now is specify the thing that they want AI to be good at or to optimize, and then reference AI in this kind of topic-centric paradigm where you are saying, I want AI to do this well, and then have this underlying kind of fluid, ever-changing set of models producing the best collective output for that. In like the blockchain world, I don't think it's like terribly distinct from the kind of move from transactions to intents. Instead of specifying the specific steps we want to take to produce some action, we specify what we want at the end of that in moving from transactions to intents. And we're trying to create a similar paradigm in AI now, is instead of interacting with models in this kind of model-centric way, people can interact with AI via this kind of topic-centric paradigm, which produces this like much more performant and kind of efficient environment in which we interact with and leverage AI essentially. So that's that. And then on the second point, we're really focused on this kind of problem of model coordination, intelligence provisioning. I think when you're building decentralized networks, you're already taking on this really difficult task of coordinating a bunch of actors to contribute to like some action or to perform some action. That's complex enough on its own. I think when you try to build too monolithically, when you try to start coordinating a bunch of heterogeneous actors towards heterogeneous actions, the complexity of network design compounds pretty rapidly. And that results often in like meaningful design compromises needing to be made to coordinate all these different actors and different actions. And so I think just as we've seen play out with kind of the blockchain stack, just as we've seen play out in kind of even open source development, I think this AI stack is going to be realized via this kind of modular form factor, where there are networks that are really good at model coordination, solely focused on that. There are networks really good at compute provisioning. There are models really good, or there are networks really good at data provisioning and data labeling and things like that. So we're trying to build the most optimal environment for model coordination and creating the source of collective intelligence, and then plug really tightly into other pieces of infrastructure like Bagel to support the other things that go into these models. Model creators can use data, they can use compute from other networks to produce the best possible model as assessed and as sort of aggregated in this model coordination network that we're building essentially.
Wow, it is really it's crazy how close we are. Like it feels like I guess tell me how close you are because it sounds like this stuff is pretty well developed. Like I looked at this website, but I haven't looked at any of the repos. How far along are you guys in your journey?
We're pretty far along. We're in the final phase of testnet right now, so we're pretty far along. It's going to be exciting to see how this kind of stuff plays out in real world scenarios now in the near future. And I think there's still a lot to do. I think what we've built the network for today is really optimized for kind of like AI that's useful in sort of financial domains, classical ML, stuff like that. I think there's a lot to explore in making the network more generally expressive to encapsulate the kind of totality of types of AI that exist. But I do think that not only Allora, but in general, we're starting to see these different distinct layers of the AI stack emerge and different pieces of infrastructure or networks get to the point where they can start going live and be used in like larger real world applications, that the rate of progression is going to kind of pick up exponentially now, in my opinion.
Yeah. I was just on the phone right before this with the founder of OrangeDAL. They're like Ben Ha. I don't know if you know them, but they're like a accelerator. He's a GP there. And his background is from media originally. Like he was a journalist. He had some pretty successful websites. And he and I, after he came on on the Index podcast, were just talking about how, I view the Index as a media company, and we've developed this like I call it a Kanban system. Like it's a similar to the Toyota development system, production system, for how we create our product, our content. And we were talking about how it would be awesome to just automate all this with AI. And the places that have the data that would make this possible are like social media networks. And right now, if you look at Grok, he made the point that like their Grok and like ChatGPT are like trying to do everything, right? With all that data that they have. And really what you need to make things that are actually good is point specific models, right? That are really good at that thing. And that's kind of what Bagel and what Allora are going to enable to happen. Like the way I'm viewing the story here is Bagel is the monetization layer for the training and fine tuning of and contributions to these models. Allora is the way these models coordinate and abstracts the need for a developer to have to like manage like 10 different models, right? Like they can just manage one interface where they can now get the best inference that they need. And it's just really fascinating. Like I literally just had a conversation about a very similar problem, and you're really connecting the dots for me and like why this is important and how big this could get. I want to shift a little bit here to Bidhan. You guys just released some research. Big part of the show is like sharing open source research and findings and things like that. And happy Nick, if you guys have some stuff that's recently come out or contributed to, you want to talk about, we should talk about it. But Bidhan, you guys just like released on Twitter some research. Can you talk about that? Because it's kind of going viral about the work that you guys have just done.
Yeah, happy to. So tying back to the point you made, right? The monetization layer where open source developers can contribute and monetize their work. So when we started working on that, we thought about like how it's done today in open source. What happens is that like open source developers, they build models and they have some kind of licenses they put in the models. Then when they open source the model and they say like, hey, if you use this model to make money or commercial use cases, then you have to pay me back. That's what the license says. And that you have to do it usually. But that doesn't work. That does not happen all the time. A lot of people just download these open source model and run privately in the server, and they never have to pay back. And we even see the violation of the whole thing at even state level. I believe we talked about this before, where we have seen China is using Llama for military use cases, right? Which is against the policy of Meta when they open source it. And but China doesn't care. Like they're using it anyway. And Zuckerberg is like kind of begging them to stop, but it does not happen. They don't care. So we realized that this kind of licensing doesn't work. What we have to do is allow for the attribution through cryptographically verifiable way. And what that means is that if you're a contributor, you can keep your contribution private to yourself, but at the same time, you can allow other actors to utilize that contribution and then make money off of it. So that's the problem statement we started working with. But there were big problems in that. Like if you want to keep your stuff private, but at the same time, you can kind of verify to other counterparties that you actually contributed and the quality of the contribution is that good. You need to provide some kind of ZK proof, which is really, really expensive. Like ZK proofs are really hard. They take a long time in terms of latency. The last time someone tried to prove anything like this with ZK, it took thousands of hours, not seconds, hours. So that's the context. And then we have been working on this problem and we have been trying to figure out a way where we can do this in a really efficient way. And very recently, we were able to achieve that breakthrough, where an open source developer can contribute some set of parameters to a model, but at the same time, they can keep that parameter set private to themselves. And on the other side, like an open source base model owner who are going to accept the contribution to their base model, they can verify each contribution using zero knowledge cryptography in seconds. So literally seconds. So we know
That makes it commercially viable. Like you can't wait thousands of hours for something to happen, but a few seconds, yeah, of course you can do that.
Yeah, so you don't have to do licensing anymore, but at the same time you can use cryptography and you can have 100% guarantee of verifiability using cryptography. And how we do this, we allow the open source contributors to provide adaptive layers to this open source base model. And these adaptive layers, there's a specialized adaptive layer. It's called Allora. It's like low-ranked adaptation of open source contribution. And the research that we shared is called ZK Allora. So basically, Alex, you have a model, and Nick, you want to contribute a Allora parameter to Alex's model. Using ZK Allora, you can prove to Alex that you actually improved his model in seconds without revealing any of the parameters that you have. So that guarantees two things. Like Alex gets his guarantee that you actually improved Nick, but Nick, you also get the guarantee that Alex is going to pay you before you actually reveal your contribution. And that's how we basically solve one of the biggest problems in open source contributor working together.
Nick, this is probably a pretty big deal for Allora too. I mean, for the system you guys are building.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it goes back to the more general point of like where Allora and Bagel sit and how they touch each other. I think like these types of things significantly expand the sort of capabilities of these like collaborative environments for contributing and being compensated for contributing to open source models. And I think the the more robust we can make those systems, like with ZK, Allora, et cetera, the more robust we can create this sort of like collective intelligence marketplace as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Bidhan, I'm curious, like with the tech stack that we have on this call, uh, you've built some of the largest ML infrastructure in the world. When you were working at Amazon and Cash App and Instacart, places like that, you've worked on some pretty big projects. What's your view on how the Allora Bagel combo combined with some of the other networks that Nick was talking about? Like there's other point specific networks for doing specific things. How does this disrupt like centralized AI? People like XAI, OpenAI, Google, all those people, like how does this, what's the future look like if this system exists with theirs adjacent to it or something? And how does it disrupt what they're doing?
So at the end of the day, I see crypto being a coordination technology. So it allows different parties who are geographically distributed in different countries, who probably did not shake hands with each other before starting to work together, so they don't have the trust between each other. So crypto basically allows these different parties to trust each other through cryptography. And that's like the general purpose crypto in general, like started with Bitcoin and whatever, all the technologies that we had after. That's the killer use case. And protocol like Allora and Bagel are utilizing cryptography to just enable that at different parts of the AI development stack. And what that means that when all of these are mature and in the market and at scale, they're serving the developers, I can see thousands or even millions of developers coming together and building systems which are not just yet par, or they are 1,000 times better than the systems that are being built by OpenAI or XAI. That's the grand vision. I believe the whole space is working together to build.
What's your take, Nick?
I agree. I think, yeah, I think that was well said. I think decentralized networks are more than anything else, arguably, means of creating hyper-focused or tightly scoped market environments for the provisioning of different nebulous resources and turning different nebulous resources into more kind of tangible digital commodities. And I think the markets being the greatest coordination mechanism in the world make these networks a means of more efficiently provisioning goods and kind of like eliciting intelligence, data, compute, whatever it is that goes into kind of producing a decentralized instantiation of AI in a kind of more optimal way as a function of that. So yeah, not a ton to add, honestly. I think that's pretty well said.
Last show that Bidhan and I recorded together, we were talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence, and ASI, artificial super intelligence. And it all just like used to feel so sci-fi to me, but now we know that we're like months, not years away from some of this stuff from companies like OpenAI. And I share Bidhan's vision of like millions of people contributing to open source software on decentralized networks that get us there. That actually, the meme like actually accelerate the world towards something that's open and public and accessible to anyone. Because right now, that's all that power centralized, all of that. And it really is. I mean, we've made this comparison before and it sounds dramatic, but it's not. It's like a nuclear arms race, right? To like who's going to ship artificial super intelligence first. And so I think like for the people on this call, like our North Star is like mobilize the community of open source developers to create the AGI and even on ASI, like faster. Can we do it? Can we do it in 6 months? Can we do it in 12? Can we get like thousands of people building on Bagel and building on Allora and making like profitable applications? Like the economy is the thing that matters the most. If you generate this economy, the builders will come. I mean, Solana is a great example of that, how successful it has been. They focused from day one on shipping open source software in a public repo and building an economy that served builders, that got builders paid. And now we've got companies on chain earning, 50 million a day in fees right? Like it's crazy, but that was like when I joined in 2021, there was like one app, there was like Serum and not that much else on the network. And so I think for people who are listening, like it may seem like, oh, this is far off. It's like not, how are you going to coordinate in that way? But all this stuff that was built between now 2021 on Solana and today, dude, that flywheel took off pretty early on. Like it just took a life of its own. And so I think you guys, when you launch your main nets coming up soon, you're going to be surprised at how fast this thing kind of takes off. But I guess my question to you, both of you, and maybe we'll start with Nick first, like, do you think it's doable? Can we get a people powered AGI built on top of your two technology stacks, like in a very short period of time?
Well, we'll see, I guess. I hope so. I think like there is merit to the argument that like decentralized systems can progress a lot faster as a function of this kind of permissionless composability and markets being this great coordination mechanism propelling things forward. I think that's why we've seen in DeFi, for example, so much of this kind of decentralized financial stack be built in such a short period of time, because people can permissionlessly take these like hyper composable building blocks, combine them to create more expressive or complex building blocks, and do that recursively. I think we'll see something else play out as the decentralized AI stack starts to come online, and that permissionless composability accelerating the rate of progression significantly. And I also just think it's important for the world. I think like we were at a similar crossroads in the early days of the internet, where there were people that saw and wanted the internet to be this kind of open public utility. There were other companies that for kind of like self-oriented reasons wanted it to be this kind of private good, these intranets. And I think ultimately society is where it is now, and society is far better off because the internet as public utility won. And I think we're at a similar crossroads in AI today, where AI is largely instantiated as this kind of private good generated and sold by centralized institutions. And decentralized AI offers us an opportunity to realize intelligence, now AI, as a public utility too. And I think it's just as important, arguably more important than what we did in kind of conceptualizing or instantiating information as a public utility. It's just as important for intelligence to be instantiated as a public utility.
100%. My question for you, Bidhan, is a little bit different, because I already know you think it's possible. I mean, maybe I don't know about the time frame, which is a big variable, but I think you think it's possible. You made that pretty clear. My question is more, should this be the drumbeat of the founders who are building these networks? Like, should this be a big part of the message and the thing that we like mobilize the builders around, is like getting to a place where there is a people powered artificial super intelligence or artificial general intelligence, like whichever one you want to pick. But should that be the thing that we all like rally around, or is there something else?
I mean, I think you know my answer to that as well, right? I think yes, but I'll give a different reason. Like Nick mentioned really well, that why the decentralization is important from the perspective of like principles or open economy or access to everyone. I don't know that, but I'll kind of talk to it about the talk to it from the perspective of the how big it can get, or how, if we talk about ASI, we talk about super intelligence, how super the intelligence can get, right? So if you want to look at that, like you have to look at the intelligence we have nowadays, right? The human intelligence. How did that develop? That developed through evolution, right? Like evolution, the like DNA is coming together, and there's always like some kind of mutation in some DNA, and that kind of ended up being the super intelligent society that we have. And what that means is that like there was certain amount of entropy in the system, which allowed this to be this much sophisticated that we have today. So from that, we have like lots of other examples too, but I truly believe that if you really want to have something super sophisticated, you need entropy in the system for it to like get to the amazing like super intelligent entity that it becomes. And we don't have that within the big AI labs who are trying to build these AGI or ASIs at the moment. They're like small group of people, maybe 100 or 200 people, if it's a very big lab, and they're working towards that same goal, and they're working with like same algorithm, same research paper and whatnot. But what the decentralized and incentivized networks allow us is that like kind of introduce that little bit of entropy within the system, where some random actor from a random corner of the world, they can introduce like a very different approach to some solution, which no one else would have thought about. And when we will get all of these small mutations within the system and they evolve, that's when we will have the actual super intelligence. And I truly believe that through these decentralized peer-to-peer networks, the amount of intelligence we can get is way higher than the ones these AI labs can do, even with billions of dollars.
Well, it's so fascinating. I can't wait to see how it plays out. Nick, we're kind of at the top of the show, so I always ask this question: what have we not asked you or talked about that we should have talked about?
Oh, I don't know. I think there's obviously a lot of interesting stuff going on with AI agents right now. AI agents in sort of like the crypto landscape and the DeFi landscape, and yeah, I think like agents are interesting in this kind of first wave of agents we've seen because they're these sort of like autonomous actors that can attract capital really well. And I think they aren't as proficient in sort of allocating that capital or putting that capital to productive use. And I think a lot of what this next wave of agents will be built around is going to be plugging into kind of different pieces of AI infrastructure or decentralized AI infrastructure to now kind of complete the sort of feature set in not only being able to form capital at scale, but now allocate it at scale. And yeah, there's some pretty interesting research we've been doing. We've been spending a lot of time in this kind of landscape and kind of building Allora for agents, and Allora being this kind of intelligence layer for agents to consume and run off and do a bunch of different things. And the way we've sort of been structuring it is in this kind of towards this goal of maximizing chaos or maximizing entropy across these agents to see all of these kind of weird emergent behaviors, strategies, et cetera, to kind of come about. So I'd say that's the only thing. The agent landscape is a whole other rabbit hole.
Where can people go to learn more about what you guys are building and how to contribute?
I think the website's a good jumping off point, allora.network, and then the Discord's pretty active. There's a lot of people in there, a lot of people kind of having conversations stuff. So yeah, the website, and then that can lead to the Discord, the Twitter, stuff like that.
Awesome. Bidhan, anything else to add?
And find us on Twitter. It's Twitter. Our handle is Bagel Open AI. Just find us there.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.